The rain hammered against the windows of the small coffee shop like angry fists demanding entry. Sarah Martinez pulled her worn leather jacket tighter around her shoulders as she sat in the corner booth, her eyes scanning the nearly empty establishment. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m., and she knew she was taking a risk being here this late. But the message had been clear: midnight, corner booth, come alone. Her calloused fingers wrapped around the warm ceramic mug, finding comfort in its heat. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she kept it close anyway. Old habits died hard, and in her line of work, having something to throw or use as a distraction could mean the difference between life and death. Not that anyone in this sleepy Oregon town would suspect that the quiet woman who ran the local self-defense classes had once been one of the military's most elite trainers. The bell above the door chimed, and Sarah's muscles tensed instinctively. A tall man in a dark coat entered, water dripping from his clothes onto the checkered linoleum floor. He moved with purpose, his eyes immediately finding hers across the dimly lit space. This was him. This was the person who had been leaving cryptic messages on her answering machine for the past 3 days. As he approached her table, Sarah noticed the way he carried himself. Military bearing was unmistakable once he knew what to look for. The straight shoulders, the measured steps, the constant awareness of exits and potential threats. But there was something else in his demeanor that made her uneasy. Desperation, anger, fear. Sarah Martinez? His voice was rough, like he'd been shouting or hadn't slept in days. She nodded slowly, keeping her hands visible and ready. You're the one who's been calling. Without invitation, he slid into the booth across from her. Up close, she could see the dark circles under his eyes, the stubble covering his jaw, and something that looked suspiciously like dried blood on his knuckles. This man was running from something, or running towards something equally dangerous. My name is Marcus Webb, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 days ago, my daughter Emma was taken from her college dorm room. No ransom demand, no contact, nothing. The police say they're investigating, but I know they're not moving fast enough. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but inside, her heart clenched. She had seen too many parents destroyed by the loss of their children during her years of service. I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm not sure how I can help you. I teach self-defense classes and run a small gym. I'm not a private investigator. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes burning with intensity. Don't lie to me. I know who you are. I know what you did before you came to this nothing town. I've spent the last month tracking down anyone who might have the skills to find my daughter, and your name keeps coming up. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She had been very careful to bury her past, to create a new identity far from the world she once knew. The fact that this man had found her meant that either he had serious connections, or someone had pointed him in her direction. Neither possibility was good. I think you have me confused with someone else, she said carefully. Marcus reached into his coat, and Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward the knife concealed in her boot. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a photograph. It was grainy, clearly taken from a distance with a long lens, but it showed Sarah in military fatigues standing next to a group of men in Navy SEAL uniforms. She recognized the training facility in the background, remembered that day with painful clarity. Fort Bragg, 2018, Marcus said. You were training SEAL Team 6 for their mission in Syria. The mission that saved 200 hostages and took out one of the most dangerous terrorist cells in the region. The same mission that earned you the Defense Superior Service Medal, though was never made public. Sarah's blood ran cold. That information was classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of people knew the details of what had happened in Syria, and most of them were either dead or sworn to secrecy that went far beyond normal military protocol. Who sent you? The words came out harder than she intended, and before she knew it, her hand had shot across the table to grip his collar. The move was so fast and unexpected that Marcus barely had time to register what was happening before he found himself pulled halfway across the table, his face inches from hers. Who knows about me? She hissed, her grip tightening on the fabric of his shirt. Who told you where to find me? Marcus tried to pull back, but Sarah's hold was iron. She had trained some of the strongest men in the world, had broken grown Navy SEALs during conditioning exercises. This desperate father, despite his military background, was no match for her. I can't breathe, he gasped, his hands coming up to try to loosen her grip. Sarah realized she was letting her fear control her actions. She released him and settled back in her seat, but Her body remained coiled and ready for action. "Answer my question." Marcus rubbed his throat, coughing slightly as he straightened his shirt. "Jesus, they weren't kidding about your training methods." He took a shaky breath. "It was Colonel James Harrison. He said if anyone could find Emma, it would be you." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Jimmy Harrison had been her commanding officer, her mentor, and, for a brief time, something more. He was also the only person who knew the real reason she had left the military and disappeared into civilian life. If Jimmy had sent this man to her, it meant the situation was more serious than a simple kidnapping. "Where is Jimmy now?" she asked. "Dead." Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. "Car accident 3 weeks ago, right after Emma was taken. But before he died, he gave me a letter. Told me to find you if anything happened to him or his family." Now Sarah was genuinely afraid. Jimmy Harrison was one of the most careful, paranoid men she had ever known. He didn't believe in coincidences, and he sure as hell wouldn't die in a simple car accident unless someone wanted him dead. What did the letter say? Marcus reached into his pocket again, this time pulling out a sealed envelope. Sarah's name was written on the outside in Jimmy's familiar handwriting. She took it with trembling fingers, breaking the wax seal that she knew Jimmy only used for the most sensitive communications. The letter was brief, written in the coded language they had developed during their covert operations. "Sarah, if you're reading this, then the ghosts have found me. The Phoenix Project was supposed to be buried, but someone is digging it up. Emma Webb is the key they need, though she doesn't know it. Her father is a good man, but he's walking into a trap he can't see. Trust him, but trust no one else. They know where you are now. Run or fight, your choice, but don't let them get the girl. The sins of our past are coming home." Sarah read the letter 3 times before it fully sank in. The Phoenix Project. She hadn't heard that name in 5 years, had hoped she would never hear it again. It was the operation that had made her reputation, that had saved hundreds of lives, and that had ultimately destroyed everything she cared about. "What does your daughter study?" she asked Marcus, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. "Computer science and cryptography at MIT. She's brilliant, always has been. When she was 12, she hacked into the school's computer system just to prove she could do it. Got suspended for a week, but the principal was more impressed than angry. Of course, Emma Webb wasn't just any college student. She was the daughter of Marcus Webb, former NSA analyst, and apparently she had inherited his talent for breaking codes. In the wrong hands, those skills could be used to unravel security systems that protected some of the nation's most dangerous secrets. Sarah folded the letter and slipped it into her jacket pocket. "Tell me everything that happened the night she was taken. Every detail, no matter how small." Marcus's relief was visible. For the first time since he had walked into the coffee shop, his shoulders relaxed slightly. "It was a Tuesday night. Emma always called me at 9 o'clock, every Tuesday and Friday without fail. When she didn't call, I knew something was wrong. She never missed those calls, not once in 3 years." He paused to take a sip of the coffee the waitress had brought him, his hands still shaking slightly. "I drove to Boston that night, got to her dorm at 2 in the morning. The campus security said her roommate had reported her missing around midnight when she didn't come back from the library." "Did they check the library's security cameras?" "That's the thing," Marcus said, his voice growing angry. "All the cameras from that night were mysteriously corrupted. Every single one, from the dorm to the library to the parking lot. Technical malfunction, they said." Sarah nodded grimly. She had seen this before. Professional extractions left minimal evidence, and corrupted security footage was a standard part of the cleanup. "What about her room? Did they take anything?" "Her laptop was gone, and her external hard drives. But they left her jewelry, her cash, even her credit cards. Whoever took her only wanted her computer equipment. That confirmed it. This wasn't about ransom money or random violence. Someone had specifically targeted Emma Webb for her technical skills, and they had been professional enough to make it look like she had simply vanished." "There's something else," Marcus continued. 2 days after she disappeared, I got a call on my old NSA emergency line, a line that's been disconnected for 10 years. The voice was electronically disguised, but the message was clear: stop looking for your daughter, or you'll join her. Sarah felt the familiar cold weight of dread settling in her stomach. The NSA emergency line was something only a handful of people would know about, people with clearance levels that most government employees didn't even know existed. Someone with serious connections was behind Emma's disappearance. "Why didn't you tell the FBI about the phone call?" Marcus laughed bitterly. Because 3 hours after I got that call, 2 federal agents showed up at my house with a warrant to search for evidence that I had been selling classified information to foreign governments. Suddenly, I'm under investigation for treason, and my missing daughter becomes a secondary concern. The picture was becoming clearer, and Sarah didn't like what she was seeing. Emma Webb had been taken by people with the resources and connections to manipulate federal law enforcement agencies. They had neutralized her father by making him a suspect in a national security investigation, ensuring that his credibility would be questioned and his movements monitored. "You're being set up," Sarah said. "They're using you as a distraction while they extract whatever information they need from your daughter." "I know that," Marcus replied. "That's why I came to you." Jimmy Harrison said you were the only person he trusted to handle a situation like this. He said you had experience with ghosts from the Phoenix Project. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of old decisions pressing down on her. She had spent 5 years building a quiet life, teaching civilian women how to defend themselves, running a small gym, trying to forget the things she had seen and done in service to her country. But the past had a way of finding you, no matter how far you ran. "If I help you," she said slowly, "there's no going back. These people killed Jimmy because he knew too much, and they'll kill us both without hesitation if we get in their way. Your daughter might already be dead." Marcus's jaw tightened. "She's not dead. A father knows these things. Emma is alive, and she's fighting back in whatever way she can. But she needs help, and I can't do this alone." Sarah studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or hidden agenda. She had learned to read people during her years of training soldiers, to see past the facades they presented to the world. Marcus Webb was exactly what he appeared to be, a desperate father who would do anything to save his child. But there was something else in his expression, something that reminded her of the young SEALs she had trained. Determination, courage, the willingness to walk into hell if it meant protecting the people they loved. "There are conditions," she said finally. "First, you do exactly what I tell you. When I tell you, no questions asked. Second, you accept that this might not have the ending you want. And third, once we start this, we finish it. No backing out, no changing your mind when things get dangerous." Marcus nodded without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." Sarah finished her cold coffee in one gulp and stood up. "Then we start now. Grab your coat. We need to get out of here before they realize you found me." As they moved toward the door, Sarah's mind was already working through the logistics of what they were about to attempt. Finding Emma Webb would require skills she hadn't used in years, contacts she had hoped never to call again, and a willingness to return to a world she had tried to leave behind. But as they stepped out into the rain-soaked night, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Purpose. For 5 years, she had been existing, going through the motions of a normal life. Now, suddenly, she was alive again. The hunt had begun. Marcus followed her to a beaten-up Honda Civic parked in the shadows behind the coffee shop. It wasn't what he had expected from someone with a reputation, but Sarah had learned long ago that the best way to hide was in plain sight. "Get in," she said, scanning the street for any signs of surveillance. "We have about 6 hours before they figure out that you found me. That's not much time to plan a rescue mission." As they drove through the empty streets of the small Oregon town, Sarah's mind raced through everything she knew about the Phoenix Project and the people who might want to resurrect it. The operation had been designed to train elite soldiers for missions that officially didn't exist, using techniques that pushed the boundaries of what the human body and mind could endure. But it had also created something else, a network of highly trained operatives who knew secrets that could topple governments and expose operations that were supposed to remain buried forever. If someone was trying to access those secrets, Emma Webb's skills as a cryptographer would be invaluable. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked as they merged onto the highway heading north. "Somewhere safe, where we can plan our next move," Sarah replied. "But first I need to make some calls. People who owe me favors, people who might know where your daughter is being held." She didn't tell him that most of those people were probably dead, or that the favor she was planning to call him might cost more than either of them was prepared to pay. Some stones were better left unturned, but they no longer had the luxury of leaving the past buried. The road stretched out ahead of them, leading into the darkness of an uncertain future. But for the first time in years, Sarah Martinez felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The ghosts of the Phoenix Project were stirring, and she was ready to face them. The abandoned warehouse sat like a sleeping giant in the industrial district outside Portland. Sarah had purchased it under a false name 3 years ago, one of several safe houses she maintained across the Pacific Northwest. Old paranoia died hard, and tonight she was grateful for those careful preparations. Marcus followed her through a maze of shipping containers and rusted machinery to a hidden entrance that looked like just another section of corrugated metal siding. Sarah pressed her hand against the concealed scanner, and the false wall slid open with barely a whisper. "Welcome to my office," she said, leading him into what appeared to be a sophisticated command center hidden within the industrial shell. Banks of computer monitors lined the walls, their blue glow illuminating racks of communications equipment that looked more advanced than anything Marcus had seen during his NSA days. Maps covered every available surface, marked with pins and notations in a code he didn't recognize. But what caught his attention most was the weapons cache that took up an entire wall: assault rifles, tactical gear, and equipment he couldn't identify, but that looked decidedly military in origin. "Jesus," he breathed. "How long have you been preparing for something like this?" "Since the day I left active duty," Sarah replied, settling into a chair before a bank of monitors. Her fingers flew across multiple keyboards, awakening systems that had been dormant for months. Paranoia is a survival skill in our line of work. The moment you think you're safe is the moment you're dead. She pulled up a secure communication program that would route their signals through a dozen proxy servers across 3 continents. Within minutes, she was connected to a voice she hadn't heard in 2 years. Well, the ghost of Sarah Martinez rises from the dead. The voice belonged to Tony Reeves, former Delta Force operator turned freelance intelligence broker. "I heard you were teaching yoga to soccer moms in Oregon." "Self-defense, not yoga," Sarah corrected. "And I need information, Tony." Someone grabbed the daughter of Marcus Webb, former NSA. "I think it's connected to Phoenix." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Tony finally spoke, his tone had changed completely. "Shit, Sarah. Phoenix? That's not a name people say out loud anymore. Half the people connected to that operation are dead, and the other half wish they were. Jimmy Harrison is dead. Car accident 3 weeks ago. Jimmy's dead." Tony's voice cracked slightly. "Christ, he was one of the good ones. How bad is this situation?" Sarah looked at Marcus, who was listening intently to her side of the conversation. "Bad enough that Jimmy sent his last message through a civilian. Bad enough that federal agents are investigating Marcus for treason to keep him quiet. Bad enough that whoever has his daughter corrupted an entire night's worth of security footage at MIT. Mitt?" Tony's voice sharpened. "Wait, Marcus Webb, former NSA cryptography specialist? The guy who broke the Tehran cipher in '09. You know him? Know of him? His work on asymmetric encryption saved about 1,000 American lives that year. If someone grabbed his daughter, they're not looking for ransom money. They're after something bigger." Sarah pulled up Emma Webb's academic records on another monitor. The girl's transcript read like a masterclass in advanced mathematics and computer science, cryptographic analysis, quantum computing theory, advanced network security. At 19, she was already publishing papers that senior researchers couldn't fully understand. "The girl's a prodigy," Sarah said. "Top 1% at MIT. Published 3 papers on quantum cryptography before her 20th birthday. In the wrong hands, her skills could break encryption systems that protect everything from nuclear launch codes to banking networks." "Fuck." Tony was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, you need to know something. I've been hearing chatter for the past month. Nothing specific, just whispers about someone trying to reassemble pieces of Phoenix. Word is they're offering serious money for anyone connected to the original operation." "How serious?" 8 figures serious. Problem is, most of the people they've approached have ended up having accidents. Car crashes, heart attacks, random muggings gone wrong. The kind of accidents that happen to people who know too much. Sarah felt the familiar chill of recognition. She had seen this pattern before, during the darker days of the Phoenix Project. Someone was systematically eliminating anyone who might interfere with their plans, but they needed specific information first. That's where Emma Webb came in. "I need locations, Tony. Anywhere someone might hold a high-value target for an extended extraction. Somewhere with the kind of security that could contain someone like Emma, but still allow for the kind of technical work they need her to do. That's a short list. Give me 12 hours, and I'll have some possibilities." "But Sarah," Tony's voice carried a warning. "Be careful who you trust. Phoenix had tentacles everywhere, and some of them might still be moving." After ending the call, Sarah leaned back in her chair and studied Marcus. He had been remarkably patient during the conversation, but she could see the questions burning in his eyes. Your daughter isn't just brilliant, she told him. She's dangerously brilliant. The kind of brilliant that makes her target for anyone who wants to break encryption systems that protect national security. Marcus nodded grimly. I know. I've been protecting her from that world her entire life, trying to keep her away from the kind of work that destroyed my marriage and nearly got me killed twice. Tell me about the Phoenix Project, Sarah said. What do you know about it? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. More than I should. I was brought in as a consultant in 2017 during the early phases. They needed someone who could develop unbreakable communication protocols for deep cover operatives. Sarah's attention sharpened. You helped design the Phoenix encryption system? I designed the core architecture. Quantum-based, impossible to break with conventional methods. At least, it was supposed to be impossible. His voice carried the weight of old regrets. The system was used to coordinate the Syria mission, the one Jimmy mentioned in his letter. But after that operation, something went wrong. What kind of wrong? Marcus stood up and began pacing, his agitation clear. 3 months after Syria, I started getting reports that Phoenix communications were being intercepted. Not broken, intercepted. Someone had gained access to the core encryption keys, the ones that were supposed to be stored in a quantum vault that couldn't be accessed remotely. Sarah felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Someone had an inside source. More than that, someone had planned from the beginning to eventually gain access to every Phoenix communication ever sent. Every operation, every agent identity, every safe house, and weapons cache. Everything. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Phoenix Project had been more than just a training program. It had been a comprehensive intelligence operation that had tentacles reaching into every aspect of American covert operations. If someone had gained access to that information 5 years ago, they would have had the capability to systematically identify and eliminate anyone connected to the project. That's why people have been dying, she said. Someone's been using Phoenix intelligence to hunt down former operatives. And now they need Emma to break whatever security measures are still protecting the deepest levels of the system, Marcus added. The parts that even I couldn't access. Sarah turned to another computer and began pulling up files she had hoped never to access again. Her own Phoenix records, encrypted and hidden in a server farm in Iceland that officially didn't exist. The information she found confirmed her worst fears. According to this, there were 47 people with level 5 Phoenix clearance, she said, studying the list of names. As of last month, 32 of them are dead. Marcus leaned over her shoulder to read the screen. Accidents. Car crashes, heart attacks, hunting accidents, drug overdoses. All perfectly plausible, all statistically impossible when you look at the pattern. She highlighted several entries. These 3 died in the past 6 weeks, all after Emma was taken. Someone's accelerating their timeline. The computer chimed with an incoming message through the secure channel. Tony Reeves had found something. Sarah, I got good news and bad news. Good news. I found 3 facilities that match your parameters. Bad news. One of them is a black site that officially doesn't exist, run by a private military contractor with ties to half the intelligence agencies in Washington. Sarah downloaded the intelligence package Tony had assembled. 3 locations: an abandoned military research facility in Nevada, a private security compound in Montana, and a renovated oil platform in the Gulf of Mexico. Each had the kind of isolation and security that would be necessary to hold someone like Emma Webb while still providing the technical infrastructure she would need to work. The oil platform, Marcus said, studying the files. That's where they'd take her. What? Look at the technical specifications. Dedicated fiber optic lines, military-grade power systems, isolated communications. It's perfect for the kind of work they'd need her to do. And if she tried to escape, she'd have nowhere to go. Sarah pulled up satellite imagery of the platform. It sat 30 miles off the Louisiana coast, connected to the mainland by helicopter and boat. The structure had been converted from oil production to something that looked suspiciously like a research facility, complete with what appear to be server farms and communications arrays. The platform is owned by Meridian Security Solutions, she said, reading from the intelligence file. Private military contractor, founded in 2018. CEO is someone named David Kane. Marcus went pale. I know that name. From where? David Kane was the Pentagon liaison for the Phoenix Project. He had access to everything, knew everyone involved. If anyone would have the connections to pull off something like this, it would be him. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that always preceded combat. The pieces were finally coming together, and the enemy was beginning to show his face. David Kane had been inside the Phoenix Project from the beginning, perfectly positioned to slowly gather intelligence and plan for this moment. "We need to move fast," she said, beginning to pull weapons from the cache. "If they have Emma working on breaking Phoenix encryption, we might already be too late." Marcus watched as she loaded magazines and checked equipment with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done it thousands of times. "You're talking about assaulting a heavily defended position 30 miles offshore with just the two of us?" "No," Sarah replied, slinging an assault rifle over her shoulder. "I'm talking about rescue operation with a very specific set of objectives. Get in, get Emma, get out. Minimum engagement, maximum surprise." She pulled a tactical vest from a storage locker and tossed it to Marcus. "You said you'd do whatever it takes. This is what it takes." Marcus caught the vest, his expression grim but determined. "I haven't been in the field since 2010. It's like riding a bicycle," Sarah said. "Except if you fall off, people shoot at you." She opened another locker and retrieved something that made Marcus's eyes widen. A military-grade diving suit equipped with what appeared to be a personal submarine propulsion device. "How do you even acquire equipment like this?" "Very carefully, and with help from people who prefer not to ask too many questions." Sarah began checking the diving equipment methodically. "The platform has underwater access points for maintenance divers. We go in from below, avoid the perimeter security, extract Emma through the same route. And if we're wrong? If she's not there?" Sarah's expression was grim. "Then we find out where she really is and repeat the process. But, Marcus, you need to understand something. Once we start this, there's no going back. David Kane and whoever he's working with will know we're coming for them. They'll throw everything they have at stopping us." Marcus nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Emma is all I have left. If there's even a chance she's on that platform, I have to try." "Good." Sarah sealed the diving equipment in waterproof cases. "Because we leave in 2 hours. There's a boat waiting for us in Newport, and the platform's night shift change happens at 0300. That's our window." As they loaded equipment into the Honda Civic, Sarah's secure phone buzzed with another message. This one wasn't from Tony Reeves. The number was blocked, but the message was clear. "We have Emma Webb. Stop searching for her, or she dies. You have 24 hours to stand down." Sarah showed the message to Marcus, who went white as he read it. "They know," he said. "They know we're coming." "No," Sarah replied, starting the car. "They know we're looking. There's a difference." She pulled out of the warehouse compound, heading toward the coast. In the distance, storm clouds were gathering over the Pacific, and the wind was beginning to pick up. Perfect weather for what they had planned. "Sarah," Marcus said as they drove through the night. "If something happens to me, if I don't make it out—" "You'll make it out," she interrupted. "Both of you will." But even as she said it, Sarah knew the odds they were facing. A heavily defended platform, unknown number of hostiles, and an enemy who had been planning this operation for years. It was the kind of mission that even a full SEAL team would approach with caution. They were two people against what might be an army. But they had surprise, desperation, and skills that few people possessed. Sometimes that was enough. The road stretched out before them, leading toward the coast, and whatever waited for them on that platform in the darkness of the Gulf. Behind them, the lights of Portland disappeared into the night, and with them, any possibility of a normal life. The hunt was about to become a war. As they drove, Sarah's mind was already working through the tactical challenges they would face. Platform security, guard rotations, extraction routes. But underneath the professional planning, something else was burning. Anger. David Kane had betrayed everything the Phoenix Project stood for, had turned a mission to protect America into a personal quest for power and profit. That betrayal had cost lives, including Jimmy Harrison's life. And now it threatened an innocent young woman whose only crime was being brilliant enough to break codes that others wanted broken. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling the familiar cold focus that had made her one of the military's most effective trainers settling over her like armor. David Kane had made this personal when he had targeted Jimmy. Now he was about to learn why even Navy SEALs had feared disappointing their instructor. The storm was coming both literally and figuratively. And Sarah Martinez was ready for both. The fishing boat Mary Catherine cut through the choppy waters of the Gulf of Mexico like a knife through dark silk. Captain Elena Vasquez had been running boats in these waters for 25 years, and she knew how to read the ocean's moods. Tonight, the sea was angry, which suited their purposes perfectly. Storms getting worse, she called back to Sarah and Marcus, who were making final preparations in the boat's cramped stern. Coast Guard's calling all civilian vessels back to port. That platform of yours is going to be battened down tight. Sarah adjusted the straps on her diving equipment, testing each piece one more time. The water temperature was 68 degrees, cold enough to be dangerous if their thermal suits failed, but warm enough to allow for extended underwater work. How long until we reach the drop point? 30 minutes, Elena replied. But I have to tell you, I don't like the look of those clouds. We're heading into some serious weather. Marcus checked his underwater breathing apparatus for the 5th time, his nervousness obvious despite his attempts to appear calm. How exactly did you find a boat, Captain, willing to take us into a storm to assault a private military platform? Elena, and I have history, Sarah said simply. She used to run extraction operations for some of Jimmy Harrison's teams. Retired 5 years ago, but she still owes me a favor from Caracas. Big favor, Elena called back. What you two are planning is either very brave or very stupid. Haven't decided which yet. Sarah pulled up the platform schematics on a waterproof tablet, reviewing the intelligence Tony Reeves had provided one more time. Meridian Security Solutions has 43 personnel on the platform during night shifts. Most of them will be in the main facility or the guard towers. The underwater maintenance access is here. She pointed to a section of the platform support structure, about 15 feet below the waterline. How do you know Emma is being held there specifically? I don't. But if I were holding someone with her skills, that's where I'd put them. The platform has a dedicated research facility with all the computing power they'd need, and it's isolated enough that even if she managed to send a distress signal, it would take hours for help to arrive. Marcus studied the platform diagram, tried to memorize every detail. What if we're wrong? What if she's not there? Then we find out where she really is and try again, Sarah replied. But, Marcus, you need to understand something. This is probably our only shot. Once David Kane knows we're actively hunting him, he'll move Emma somewhere we'll never find her. The boat lurched as a large wave struck the bow, sending spray across the deck. Elena adjusted their heading slightly, keeping them on course toward the coordinates Sarah had provided. In the distance, the lights of the oil platform were becoming visible through the storm, a small constellation of stars floating on the dark water. Jesus, Marcus breathed, staring at the structure through binoculars. It's huge. The platform rose from the water like a mechanical island, its steel framework supporting multiple levels of buildings and equipment. Light blazed from windows and deck areas, and Sarah could see the movement of guards patrolling the catwalks that connected different sections. It looked more like a fortress than a research facility. Standard security setup, Sarah observed, taking the binoculars. Guard towers at the corners, patrol boats circling the perimeter, helicopter landing pad on the main deck. David Kane isn't taking any chances. She handed the binoculars back to Marcus and began pulling on her diving suit. The thick neoprene was uncomfortable in the boat's cramped quarters, but it would keep her alive in the cold water. Remember the plan. We go in through the maintenance access, make our way to the research facility, find Emma, and extract through the same route. Total time on platform, 30 minutes maximum. What if we encounter resistance? We avoid it if possible, neutralize it if necessary, Sarah replied, checking her sidearm. But remember, these people are professionals. They won't hesitate to shoot if they see us as a threat. Elena began reducing speed as they approached the drop point. According to their intelligence, the platform's perimeter patrol boats followed a predictable pattern, leaving a 15-minute window every hour when the underwater approach would be unmonitored. You've got one shot at this, Elena told them. I'll maintain position here for exactly 2 hours. If you're not back by then, I have to assume you're either dead or captured, and I'm leaving. Understood, Sarah said. She turned to Marcus, who was struggling with the unfamiliar diving equipment. Let me help you with that. She adjusted his gear with the quick efficiency of someone who had done it countless times, checking seals and connections that could mean the difference between life and death underwater. Remember, stay close to me, follow my lead exactly, and don't surface unless I signal that it's safe. Marcus nodded. though she could see the fear in his eyes. I haven't done a night dive since basic training. That was 15 years ago. It's like riding a bicycle, Sarah said, echoing her earlier words. Except if you mess up, you drown instead of falling off. She attached the underwater propulsion device to her equipment harness, a sleek device that would allow them to cover the distance to the platform quickly and quietly. The device had cost more than most people made in a year, but it was exactly the kind of equipment that could make an impossible mission merely difficult. Drop point in 2 minutes, Elena announced. Weather's getting worse. Those waves are going to make this interesting. Sarah moved to the boat's edge, checking the GPS coordinates one more time. The platform was 800 meters away, close enough that they could swim the distance if necessary, but far enough that they would be invisible from the surface. Marcus, she said, turning to face him. Once we go over the side, there's no turning back. If you're having second thoughts. No second thoughts, he replied firmly. Emma is down there, and I'm not leaving without her. Sarah nodded and activated the underwater propulsion device. Then, let's go get your daughter. They went over the side of the boat together, hitting the water with barely a splash. The ocean was warmer than Sarah had expected, but still cold enough to be shocking. She waited for Marcus to adjust to the water temperature, then activated the GPS system on her diving computer. The underwater world was a different universe, dark and silent except for the distant thrumming of the platform's machinery. Sarah used a red filtered light to check their bearing, then engaged the propulsion device. They moved through the water like torpedoes, covering the distance to the platform in less than 10 minutes. As they approached the structure, Sarah could see the massive steel supports that anchored the platform to the ocean floor. The underwater maintenance access was exactly where the schematics had indicated, a circular hatch built into one of the main support columns. She signaled for Marcus to stay back while she examined the hatch. It was secured with a simple wheel lock, designed to keep water out rather than people. Within seconds, she had it open, revealing a vertical shaft that led up into the platform's interior. The shaft was filled with seawater to the halfway point, allowing maintenance divers to access the platform's underwater systems. Sarah surfaced in the air pocket at the top of the shaft, pulling off her diving mask and breathing the stale, humid air. Marcus surfaced beside her, breathing heavily. How do we get from here to the research facility? Sarah pulled out the waterproof tablet again, checking their position against the platform schematics. There should be an access tunnel that leads to the main structure. From there, we follow the service corridors to the research level. She opened another hatch at the top of the shaft, revealing a narrow tunnel lined with pipes and electrical conduits. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow, and the air smelled of oil and metal. They moved through the tunnel in single file, Sarah leading with her weapon ready. The space was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through, and filled with the constant noise of machinery and ventilation systems. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes, they reached another hatch that opened into a maintenance corridor. Sarah listened carefully at the hatch for several seconds before opening it slowly. The corridor was empty, lit by fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. According to the schematics, the research facility was 2 levels up and 50 meters forward. They would have to cross 2 main corridors and pass at least 1 guard station. Stay behind me, Sarah whispered. If we encounter anyone, let me handle it. They moved through the platform's interior like ghosts, staying in the shadows and avoiding the main pathways. Sarah's training had taught her to move silently even in the most challenging environments, and she used every skill she possessed to keep them undetected. The first guard station was easier than expected. The single security guard was focused on a bank of monitors showing exterior cameras, his back to the corridor they needed to cross. Sarah timed their movement to coincide with a shift change announcement over the platform's intercom system, and they slipped past without being seen. The research facility was protected by electronic locks that required key cards. But Sarah had anticipated this, and she had brought equipment that could bypass most standard security systems. Within minutes, she had the door open, and they were inside the facility that held Emma Webb. The research area was more advanced than anything Marcus had expected. Banks of quantum computers lined the walls, their cooling systems humming quietly in the background. Workstations with multiple monitors showed complex mathematical equations and code fragments that even Marcus couldn't fully understand. She's here, he whispered, pointing to one of the workstations. Those are Emma's notes. I recognize her handwriting. Sarah studied the workstation, noting the half-finished equations and the personal items scattered around the desk. A coffee mug with MIT printed on the side, a photo of Marcus and Emma from her high school graduation, a small stuffed animal that looked well-loved. "She's been here recently," Sarah observed. "The coffee is still warm." They searched the research facility systematically, checking every room and storage area. The space was larger than it had appeared on the schematics, with multiple laboratories and work areas connected by narrow corridors. It was in the third laboratory that they found her. Emma Webb was seated at a computer terminal, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards as she worked on code that covered 3 large monitors. She was thin, too thin, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. But she was alive, and she was unharmed. "Emma," Marcus whispered. She turned around slowly, and her face went through a range of emotions in seconds. Surprise, disbelief, joy, and then fear. "Dad!" Her voice was barely audible. "How did you find me?" Marcus rushed forward to embrace his daughter, tears streaming down his face. "Are you hurt? Have they done anything to you?" "I'm okay," Emma said, though her voice was shaky. "They haven't hurt me, but Dad, you don't understand what they're making me do. They're forcing me to break encryption systems that protect nuclear facilities and government communications. If I finish this work, they'll be able to access anything they want." Sarah moved to the laboratory's entrance, keeping watch for guards while father and daughter reunited. "We need to move," she said urgently. "How long until they expect you to complete the work?" "They gave me 48 hours, Emma replied. "That was yesterday. If I don't finish by tomorrow night, they said they would start hurting people I care about." "Who's in charge here?" Sarah asked. "David Kane." Emma's eyes widened in surprise. "You know about him?" "Yes. He's the one who ordered my kidnapping. But there's someone else, someone he reports to. They call him Phoenix." Sarah felt ice water run through her veins. Phoenix wasn't just the name of the project. It was the code name of the operation's original architect. Someone who was supposed to be dead. "Emma, we're getting you out of here," Marcus said. "Right now." But as they moved toward the laboratory door, Sarah heard something that made her blood run cold. Footsteps in the corridor outside, and voices speaking in the clipped, professional tones of security personnel. "They know we're here," she whispered, drawing her weapon. "We're blown." The lights in the laboratory suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red. And over the platform's intercom system, a voice spoke with cold amusement. "Sarah Martinez, you always were my best student." Sarah's hands began to shake as she recognized the voice. It was impossible, but there was no mistaking those tones. "Jimmy," she whispered. "Hello, Sarah. I think it's time we had a talk." The voice belonged to Colonel James Harrison, the man who was supposed to be dead, the man whose letter had started this entire mission. But if Jimmy was alive, if he was here on this platform, then everything they thought they knew was wrong. The hunter had become the hunted, and the prey was walking into a trap that had been years in the making. Outside the laboratory, the footsteps were getting closer, and Sarah realized that their rescue mission had just become a fight for survival. Emma Webb was the key to something much larger than they had imagined, and the people who wanted to control her were willing to kill anyone who stood in their way, including Sarah Martinez and Marcus Webb. The storm was about to break, both outside and inside the platform, and Sarah wasn't sure any of them would survive what was coming. The laboratory door slid open with a soft hiss, and 3 figures stepped into the red-lit space. Sarah's weapon was trained on them instantly, but her hands trembled as she recognized the man in the center. Colonel James Harrison looked exactly as she remembered him, down to the scar on his left temple from a training accident in 2016. His gray hair was still military short. His posture still carried the bearing of a career soldier, and his eyes still held the same cold intelligence that had made him one of the most effective covert operations planners in the military. The only difference was that he was supposed to be dead. "Lower your weapon, Sarah," Jimmy said calmly. "You're outnumbered, outgunned, and there's nowhere to run. Let's handle this like professionals." "You bastard," Sarah hissed, but she didn't lower her gun. "Your funeral was 3 weeks ago. I read the obituary. Car accident on I-95, closed casket service at Arlington. An elaborate fiction, I'm afraid. Though I appreciate that you checked the obituary. It showed that you still cared, despite everything that happened between us." Marcus stepped protectively in front of Emma, his own weapon drawn, but clearly uncertain about the situation. "Sarah, who is this man?" "My former commanding officer," she replied, never taking her eyes off Jimmy. "The man who trained me, who I trusted more than anyone in the world. The man who I thought was dead." Jimmy smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Death was a necessary deception, as was the letter I left for Marcus to deliver to you. I needed you to come here, Sarah, but I knew you would never come willingly." "Why?" The word came out as barely more than a whisper. "Why fake your death? Why kidnap Emma? Why resurrect Phoenix after everything that went wrong?" "Because Phoenix was never supposed to end," Jimmy replied. "It was supposed to evolve. The Syria mission was just the beginning, Sarah, a proof of concept for something much larger." He gestured to one of his companions, who stepped forward to reveal a tablet computer. The screen showed a map of the world, marked with dozens of red dots scattered across every continent. "Phoenix operatives and assets all around the globe," Jimmy continued. "Soldiers, intelligence officers, government officials, business leaders. All of them trained by us. All of them loyal to the vision we created." Sarah stared at the map in horror. "You created a shadow army. I created the future of American intelligence operations. Imagine the power to influence any government, control any market, eliminate any threat to national security without oversight or political interference. Phoenix was never about training elite soldiers, Sarah. It was about training the people who would quietly run the world." Emma spoke up from behind her father. "The encryption systems you're forcing me to break, they're not enemy communications. They're American systems." Jimmy nodded approvingly. "Very good, Miss Webb. Your father raised an intelligent daughter. Yes, the systems you're helping us access belong to various American intelligence agencies, military installations, and government facilities. Information that will allow us to expand Phoenix operations significantly." "You're talking about treason," Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. "I'm talking about evolution," Jimmy corrected. "The old ways of conducting intelligence operations are obsolete. Too much oversight, too much political interference, too many opportunities for good operations to be shut down by politicians who don't understand the bigger picture." Sarah's mind was reeling as she tried to process what she was hearing. The man who had taught her everything about honor, duty, and service to country was describing a plan to overthrow the very government they had sworn to protect. "The Syria mission," she said slowly. "You said something went wrong afterward. The communications were being intercepted." "Nothing went wrong," Jimmy replied. "I was feeding intelligence to our enemies deliberately, allowing them to capture some of our operatives and discover some of our safe houses. It was all part of the plan to make the operation appear compromised while I quietly transferred the most valuable assets to my personal control. Those operatives who were captured, they were tortured, killed. Acceptable losses in service of a greater goal." Sarah felt rage building in her chest like a physical fire. "You son of a bitch. Those are good people. They trusted you. They served their purpose," Jimmy said dismissively. "Just as you're serving yours now. Sarah, did you really think it was a coincidence that Marcus Webb found you? That he had access to information about your location and background?" The truth hit her like a physical blow. "You led him to me. I needed you here, on this platform, at this moment. You see, Miss Webb has been remarkably resistant to our efforts to persuade her to complete her work. She seems to believe that her father is in danger somewhere, and that finishing the encryption breaking would somehow put him in more danger." Jimmy gestured toward Emma, who was staring at him with a mixture of fear and defiance. "But now that her father is here, safe and sound, she should be much more cooperative, especially when she understands that his continued safety depends entirely on her completing the work we've assigned." Marcus stepped forward, his weapon still trained on Jimmy. "You're not getting near my daughter." "I'm afraid you don't have much choice in the matter," Jimmy replied. Two more armed men stepped into the laboratory, taking positions that gave them clear shots at all three of them. "You see, this entire operation has been planned for months. Your escape from federal surveillance, your journey to find Sarah, your arrival here tonight, all of it was orchestrated to bring us to this moment." Sarah's tactical mind was working furiously, calculating angles and distances, looking for any opportunity to turn the situation around. But Jimmy was right. They were outnumbered and outgunned, trapped in a confined space with no clear escape route. "What do you want?" she asked. "Simple. Miss Webb completes her work on the encryption systems. In exchange, you and Marcus are allowed to leave the platform alive. Everyone gets what they want. And if she refuses? Jimmy's expression hardened. Then, we start removing incentives. First Marcus, then you, then we find other members of her family to motivate her with. I'm told she has grandparents in Ohio who are quite fond of her. Emma spoke up, her voice stronger than Sarah had expected. You're not going to hurt anyone else because of me. I'll finish the work. No, Marcus said firmly. Emma, you can't. Do you understand what those systems protect? Nuclear launch codes, military communications, homeland security databases. If these people gain access to that information, they could start wars or collapse entire governments. And if I don't, they'll kill you, Emma replied. I can't live with that. Sarah saw the desperation in the young woman's eyes and recognized something else: intelligence. Emma Webb was not just a brilliant computer scientist, she was also her father's daughter, with all the tactical thinking that implied. How long will it take you to finish? Sarah asked. Emma glanced at the computer terminals around the laboratory. With the quantum processing power they have here, maybe 6 hours. And how long would it take you to complete a program that looks like the work they want, but actually introduces systemic errors into any system that uses it? Jimmy's eyes narrowed. Sarah, don't even think about it. But Emma was already understanding what Sarah was suggesting. A logic bomb, something that would appear to function normally, but would actually corrupt any data it touched. She paused, thinking through the implications. I could build something like that in 3 hours. Miss Webb, Jimmy said coldly, if you attempt to sabotage the work, I will personally ensure that your father dies very slowly and very painfully. Then, you'd better make sure I don't attempt it, Emma replied with a defiance that reminded Sarah of herself at that age. The standoff stretched for several seconds, tension filling the laboratory like a living thing. Sarah could see Jimmy calculating, trying to find the best way to maintain control of the situation while still getting what he needed. There's another option, he said finally. Sarah, you know my methods, my training techniques. You could verify that Miss Webb is completing the work correctly. Serve as quality control, so to speak. Absolutely not. Then, let me offer you some additional motivation. Jimmy nodded to one of his men, who activated a tablet and showed Sarah the screen. The image showed Tony Reeves, bound to a chair in what appeared to be a cargo container. He was bloodied and clearly unconscious, but still alive. Your friend, Mr. Reeves, was asking questions about this platform. We found his inquiries somewhat inconvenient. Sarah felt cold rage building in her chest. Tony was one of the few people from her old life who had tried to stay in touch, who had helped her build a new identity when she left the military. He was a good man who didn't deserve to be caught up in Jimmy's games. Let him go, she said. Complete the verification of Miss Webb's work, and Mr. Reeves goes free. Refuse, and he dies. Simple choice. Sarah looked at Marcus and Emma, seeing the fear and desperation in their faces. Then, she looked back at Jimmy, the man who had once meant everything to her, who had taught her about honor and sacrifice and service to something greater than herself. You really have no idea what you become, do you? She said. I've become what this country needs, Jimmy replied. Someone willing to make the hard choices that politicians and bureaucrats are too weak to make. No, you become the enemy. Sarah's hand moved faster than anyone in the room except Jimmy could follow. Her weapon was out and firing before his men could react, but instead of targeting the guards, she put 2 rounds into the main server that powered the laboratory's quantum computers. Sparks flew from the damaged equipment, and alarms began blaring throughout the platform. Emergency lighting kicked in as the main power systems fluctuated. Run, Sarah shouted to Marcus and Emma as she dove for cover behind a workstation. Jimmy's men opened fire, but Sarah was already moving, using her knowledge of close-quarters combat to turn the confined space into an advantage. She rolled behind another workstation as bullets shattered computer monitors around her. Marcus grabbed Emma's hand and pulled her toward the laboratory's secondary exit, but Jimmy was faster. He intercepted them before they could reach the door, his own weapon trained on Emma's head. Enough, he shouted over the alarms. Sarah, show yourself or the girl dies right now. Sarah emerged from cover, her weapon trained on Jimmy. But she knew she couldn't take the shot without risking Emma's life. It's over, Jimmy, she said. The servers are damaged. Even if Emma completes the work, you won't have the processing power to use it. There are other servers, Jimmy replied. Other platforms, other facilities. This is just one node in a much larger network. He pressed his weapon against Emma's temple, and Sarah saw the fear in the young woman's eyes. But you're right about one thing, Jimmy continued. This particular operation is over, which means you've outlived your usefulness. Sarah saw Jimmy's finger tighten on the trigger and knew she had perhaps a second to act. Everything she had learned, every skill she had developed, every lesson Jimmy himself had taught her, compressed into a single moment of perfect clarity. She dropped to one knee and fired. The bullet took Jimmy in the shoulder, spinning him around and causing his shot to go wide. Emma broke free and ran toward her father as Jimmy's men opened fire again. But the platform's emergency systems were kicking in now, flooding the laboratory with fire-suppressant foam that made visibility nearly zero. Sarah used the chaos to her advantage, moving through the white cloud like a ghost, taking down Jimmy's men with precision shots. When the foam finally cleared, Jimmy was gone. Only one of his men remained, unconscious on the floor. Sarah quickly checked him for identification and found what she expected. Former military, currently employed by Meridian Security Solutions. "Is everyone okay?" she asked. Marcus and Emma emerged from behind an overturned desk, both shaken but unharmed. "We're fine," Marcus replied. "But, Sarah, if Jimmy's still alive." "Then, this isn't over," Sarah finished. "We need to get off this platform now. The whole operation is blown, and they'll be coming for us in force." She helped Emma gather some of the research notes from her workstation, hoping they would provide insight into the scope of the Phoenix revival. But as they moved toward the exit, Sarah's mind was already working on a larger problem. Jimmy Harrison was alive, which meant everything they thought they knew about the Phoenix Project was wrong. The network was larger and more dangerous than they had imagined, and now it was fully operational. The real war was just beginning. They made their way through the platform's corridors, alarms blaring around them as security teams mobilized to contain the situation. But Sarah knew the platform like she knew her own home now, and she led them through maintenance passages and service corridors that the security teams would never think to check. As they reached the underwater access point where they had entered, Sarah realized that their escape was about to become much more complicated. The storm outside had intensified, and the underwater route back to Elena's boat would be treacherous in the current conditions. But they had no choice. Behind them, Jimmy Harrison was probably already planning his next move, and ahead of them lay the dark ocean and an uncertain future. The Phoenix was rising, and the whole world was about to burn. The underwater escape from the platform was a nightmare of churning water and zero visibility. The storm had turned the Gulf of Mexico into a washing machine, with waves that tossed them around like toys despite their underwater propulsion devices. Sarah had a hold on to both Marcus and Emma with safety lines to prevent them from being separated in the chaos. By the time they reached Elena's boat, all three of them were exhausted and hypothermic. Elena pulled them aboard with the help of her crew, wrapping them in thermal blankets and forcing hot coffee down their throats. "Jesus, you look like hell," Elena said, studying Sarah's face in the boat's cabin light. "Did you find what you were looking for?" "More than we bargained for," Sarah replied, watching Emma Webb huddle next to her father. The young woman had been through an ordeal that would have broken most people, but she was already studying the research notes they had recovered, her brilliant mind working to understand the full scope of what Jimmy Harrison had been planning. "The encryption work they forced me to do," Emma said, looking up from the papers. "It wasn't random. They were specifically targeting systems that control infrastructure, power grids, water treatment plants, air traffic control, financial networks. If someone gained access to all of these systems simultaneously, they could cripple the entire country in a matter of hours," Marcus finished grimly. Sarah's satellite phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was one she recognized, Tony Reeves. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Sarah." Tony's voice was weak, but clear. "Thank God you're alive. Tony, where are you? We saw footage of you being held." "I'm safe for now. Managed to escape during the confusion when alarms started going off on that platform. But, Sarah, listen to me carefully. Jimmy Harrison is gone, but this operation is bigger than just him. I've been monitoring communications, and there are Phoenix cells activating all over the country." Sarah put the phone on speaker so Marcus and Emma could hear. "How many cells?" "At least 12 major ones, maybe more. They're calling it Operation Firebird. simultaneous strikes on key infrastructure targets, designed to create enough chaos for Phoenix leadership to seize control of emergency response systems. Emma grabbed the phone. When? 72 hours, Tony replied. They moved up the timeline after your escape. Someone's decided to accelerate the entire operation. Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. For 5 years, she had tried to live a quiet life, to put the violence and danger of her military career behind her. But the skills that had made her one of the military's most effective trainers were exactly what the country needed right now. Tony, I need you to compile everything you know about Phoenix locations and send it to a secure server. I'm going to give you coordinates. Sarah, Marcus said quietly, what are you planning? I'm planning to finish what we started. Jimmy Harrison and his Phoenix network represent a clear and present danger to national security. If the government can't stop them, then we will. She turned to Emma, who was still studying the research papers. That work they forced you to do, could it be reversed? Could someone use your research to create countermeasures for the systems they're trying to penetrate? Emma's eyes lit up with understanding. Not just countermeasures. I could create a program that would actually trace back through their network, identify every system they've compromised, and lock them out permanently. How long would that take? If I had access to the right equipment? Maybe 12 hours. Sarah made a decision that she knew would change all their lives forever. Marcus, do you still have contacts at NSA who might listen to what we've learned? A few, he replied cautiously. But after being investigated for treason, my credibility isn't exactly stellar. It will be when we show them proof of what Phoenix is planning. Sarah turned to Elena. How fast can this boat get us to shore? In these conditions? For hours to the nearest port. Make it 3, Sarah said. Lives depend on it. As the boat fought through the stormy seas toward shore, Sarah began making phone calls to people she hadn't spoken to in years. Former colleagues, military contacts, intelligence officers who owed her favors from operations that officially never happened. One by one, she began assembling a network of her own. What you're talking about is essentially starting a private war against a shadow organization with unlimited resources and connections throughout the government, Marcus pointed out. Yes, Sarah replied simply. But it's the right war, and we're the right people to fight it. Emma looked up from her work. I've been thinking about the larger implications of what Harrison was planning. The Phoenix network isn't just about controlling American infrastructure. Look at these communication protocols they forced me to analyze. She showed them a series of encrypted messages she had decoded. These are coordination signals for international operations. Phoenix has cells in NATO countries, in Asia, in South America. Harrison was planning to create a shadow government that could operate globally. Sarah studied the messages, feeling a chill as she recognized some of the code names and locations. This isn't just about American politics. Phoenix was planning to destabilize governments worldwide, create enough chaos to position themselves as the only viable solution to global security problems. A modern version of the Roman Empire, Marcus said. Rule through superior force and technological control. The boat's radio crackled with an emergency broadcast. All civilian vessels are advised that the Coast Guard is conducting security operations in the Gulf of Mexico. Several offshore facilities are currently under federal investigation. Sarah smiled grimly. Someone's finally paying attention. But her relief was short-lived. The radio message was followed by a news bulletin that made her blood run cold. We're receiving reports of simultaneous cyber attacks on power grids in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. Officials are calling it the most sophisticated assault on American infrastructure in history. They moved up the timeline, Emma said. Operation Firebird has begun. Sarah grabbed her satellite phone and dialed a number she had hoped never to use again. The call was answered on the first ring by a voice she recognized. This is General Patricia Morrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Who is this? General Morrison, this is Sarah Martinez, former Phoenix Project instructor. I have intelligence about the current infrastructure attacks that you need to hear immediately. There was a pause. Phoenix Project was classified at the highest levels. How do you have access to that information? Because I trained half the people who are currently attacking us, and I know how to stop them. Another pause, longer this time. Where are you? Approaching Port Arthur, Texas, with 2 civilians who have critical intelligence about Phoenix operations. General, I need a secure facility with quantum computing capability and a direct line to NSA leadership. Done. A helicopter will be waiting for you at Port Arthur Coast Guard Station. Sarah, yes, ma'am. It's good to have you back. As they approached the Texas coast, Sarah could see the helicopter waiting on the Coast Guard landing pad, its rotor blades already spinning. But she could also see something else. 3 black SUVs parked near the facility, and figures in tactical gear taking positions around the landing area. That's not a reception committee, Marcus observed grimly. Sarah raised binoculars to study the scene more carefully. Phoenix intercepts. They're monitoring military communications. Probably knew about our call to General Morrison. Emma looked up from her laptop, where she had been working on countermeasures even while the boat pitched through the rough seas. I can trace their communication intercepts back to their source if I can get access to a military-grade quantum computer. That's what they're trying to prevent, Sarah replied. She turned to Elena. Can you get us to another port? Sure, but it'll take another 6 hours in these seas. By then, their cyber attacks will have done serious damage. Sarah made another decision that went against every instinct for caution and self-preservation. Then, we go through them. She opened the weapons case she had brought from her warehouse, revealing enough firepower to outfit a small military unit. Marcus, how's your marksmanship? Rusty, but serviceable, he replied, accepting the assault rifle she handed him. Emma, I need you to stay low and keep working on those countermeasures. No matter what happens when we reach shore, don't stop working. I won't, Emma promised, her fingers already flying across her laptop keyboard. Elena guided the boat toward the Coast Guard station with the skill of someone who had done dangerous insertions before. As they approached the dock, Sarah could see Phoenix operatives moving to intercept them, but they had made a crucial mistake. They were treating this like a standard extraction operation, not like an assault by someone who had trained Navy SEALs. Sarah went over the side of the boat while it was still 50 meters from shore, swimming underwater to a position where she could flank the Phoenix team. Her years of training kicked in automatically, and she moved through the water like a predator stalking prey. The first Phoenix operative never knew what hit him. Sarah's knife found his throat before he could raise an alarm, and she was already moving toward the second target before his body hit the ground. Marcus and Emma came ashore under covering fire that Sarah provided from her new position. The remaining Phoenix operatives were skilled, but they weren't prepared for the kind of asymmetric warfare that Sarah specialized in. Within minutes, the landing area was secure, and the Coast Guard helicopter was lifting off with all 3 of them aboard. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. Phoenix would have anticipated their escape, and would already be planning their next move. ETA to the secure facility, she asked the pilot. 15 minutes to Offutt Air Force Base, he replied. Strategic Command is waiting for you. As the helicopter flew through the storm toward Nebraska, Sarah watched Emma work on her laptop, creating what might be the only weapon capable of stopping Operation Firebird. The young woman's fingers never stopped moving, even as the aircraft pitched and rolled through the turbulent air. How's it coming? Sarah asked. I think I found their central coordination system, Emma replied. All the Phoenix cells are receiving updates through a quantum encrypted network that routes through servers in 12 different countries. If I can inject my countermeasure into that network, you can shut down their entire operation. Better than that, I can turn their own systems against them, feed them false information, make them think they're succeeding when they're actually being traced and identified. Marcus looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. Emma, what you're describing is essentially cyber warfare against an unknown number of targets. If something goes wrong, Phoenix wins and democracy dies, Emma replied. I can't live with that possibility. The helicopter set down at Offutt Air Force Base exactly 15 minutes later. General Morrison was waiting for them personally, along with a team of NSA specialists and cybersecurity experts who looked like they hadn't slept in days. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. The general briefed them as they walked toward the secure facility. Power grids in 6 major cities are under attack. Financial markets are crashing as trading systems fail, and we're receiving reports of military communications being intercepted and jammed. They entered a facility that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Walls lined with quantum computers, dozens of analysts working at stations monitoring global communications, and screens showing real-time maps of infrastructure attacks across the world. This is Emma Webb, Sarah said, introducing the young woman to the assembled experts. She has the key to stopping Phoenix. Emma was already studying the facility's equipment, her mind calculating processing power and network capabilities. This will work, she said. Give me access to your quantum array, and I can have countermeasures deployed within 2 hours. Do it, General Morrison ordered. As Emma began working with the NSA's quantum computers, Sarah studied the tactical displays showing Phoenix attacks around the world. The scope was staggering: simultaneous operations in 15 countries, targeting everything from power grids to military communications to financial networks. It's coordinated to create maximum chaos, she observed. Not random attacks, but a carefully planned sequence designed to collapse public confidence in government ability to maintain